Hi, I'm Liz Solar.
I'm Betsy Billard, and this is Broadly Speaking, a place where we have opinions about just about everything. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the ways that politics has crept into everybody's lives in this country, whether or not they seek it out or not.
So we're going to get to, how to ruin a good day. We're going to talk about the Knicks. Betsy, I think you'll like that. And humor, where to go. Oh, and how to build a community once again.
Right.
So let's get to it. Betsy, we've been talking about around politics, but
Yes.
I just want to get something off my chest because often, there's that person that you hang out with, and sometimes I live in New England. It's the land of the ice and snow, right? So if
Right.
you have like a late March day and it's beautiful, it's 70 degrees, the sun is shining, you see a few buds on the trees, and you're walking with an acquaintance. Isn't this just a great day? And they'll say something like, yeah, but that's because of climate change. It's like, wah, wah. Come on.
Right.
I just want a nice Tuesday. Can we agree that it's a
I'm
nice
sorry, you can't have it. I know everything's tinged with it. Everything. Like I
every,
went I went to get a pair of sunglasses made today. There's this eyeglass place near me, and they're selling sunglasses with blue frames and orange lenses.
nice.
All right.
Yeah.
And immediately politics came into it because we were talking about the Knicks, and somebody behind the counter grumbled that he who shall not be named was at game three. And so everything, you're right, everything turns that way.
Yeah, it's like whatever color jersey. I mean, is there anybody who can wear a red baseball cap anymore?
Uh, Only if you're a Cardinals fan or a Red Sox fan.
And even
Otherwise,
then,
no.
from a distance, pitchforks and, torches can come at you. So
Right,
every piece of clothing, every game jersey, a pair of eyeglasses, sunglasses are now a political statement. How did this
right.
happen?
I don't know. There's a guy, I can't remember which team he does this with, but he sits behind home plate. He's a fan and he sits behind home plate and he has a MAGA hat on. So when you're watching a baseball game, it's always a tight shot, but you always see people in the first three rows. And he's in the first row wearing the hat, and it's unmistakable. So basically, that's his political commercial. I haven't seen him in a while,
Okay.
and I don't know whether MLB said, sorry, you got to take that off. I don't know, but yes, to your point, it's everywhere.
And do we ask people to take off their hats? I mean that's sort of like that's a bold move. Hey, take off your hat or you're out of here.
There are people where I live, as you know, I live in New York City. I have to say, like, people will scream somebody down if they see them wearing a MAGA hat. Like, we're not as polite.
I mean, I get it. I mean, I play for that team, and yet the all the vitriol around it is really starting to weigh on me, and we can't even talk about things anymore. We can't make a post about something without saying, "Oh, you're a bigot," or "You're a bad person," or "You're a communist." It's
Right,
like,
right. It's totally true, and I don't really know how that resolves itself until there's a change in leadership. I don't know how that stops, and I
but
think it's really dependent too on where you live. Like, depending on where you live, it can be, everybody's preaching to the choir, right? If you live in a purple state like Florida, it's probably more dicey. There's more room for disagreement in a state like that.
it isn't funny. Do you find yourself in certain crowds of people or certain places where you curb the conversation or you change the subject so that certain things won't be overheard?
Yeah, yeah, in Florida, which is why my last trip was last year. Because it was uncomfortable. I wanted to engage with people, and I couldn't. My parents were living in a place where they felt like they couldn't, and so they didn't. And there was kind of this unspoken rule because, Florida is obviously very split, right? And so they just made an agreement, all of these seniors who are over the age of 80, that they would never talk about it. And that seemed unreasonable to me as well. Like there has to be some kind of middle ground, right? You can't just have, I'm going to talk about it all the time, or I'm never going to talk about it. I mean, it is part of what's happening.
And it's the self-censorship that's really driving me crazy. You can't write about that because you don't know enough about it. Well, did you research it? Did you talk to enough people? Did you
Right.
get sources? Then you can write about it. And what I'm seeing, because I'm in some writing classes, are people even talking about fiction that you can't write.
Say more about that. What do you mean by that?
That if you write about a certain cultural group, unless you're a
Mm,
part of it, then you don't have the right to speak of it or to write about it. But my feeling is if you are sensitive about how you present it, if you're not presenting tropes, if you do research and your due diligence, I mean, Arthur C. Clarke never got into a spaceship, and yet he
hmm.
was able to write about somebody's adventure in space. And,
Right.
do we just shut down imagination, and creativity because somebody's going to get offended by it?
It's identity politics. I mean, I don't think a lot of good comes from it. And yet there are times where I do think it's hard to, like, I don't have the lived experience of an African American person in Harlem. I don't have that experience. So if I do talk about it, you're right. I have to research it. I have to be sensitive about it. And I have to ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, it doesn't really work.
And if you're creating a specific character, is that person a monolith? Like now, will this person represent all people in that group? So it's a very interesting time to talk about other people. There is somebody that I know who's on social media who has been very vocal about their support of Israel. And,
Hmm.
one can argue, it's pretty rough what happened at that kibbutz back a couple of years ago in October. But also, is it not genocide to kill women and children and in a different country because you don't like a faction of their population? And
Yep.
I feel like I'm no Middle East expert, but I can hold two thoughts in my head at the same time. Both are wrong.
Yeah. And I think, and both are wrong and both statements are true, right?
Yes.
Both statements are true. And I will tell you, just on a personal note, a very, very good friend of mine in New York was born in Iran, Jewish family. They left Iran in the 70s. They moved to London. And, um, they're not particularly religious. My friend obviously lives in New York City. And after October 7th, her daughter, who was in her 20s, was doing all of the marches in New York City.
Huh.
And I was very hypersensitive about that. And it was a turnoff to me that they had fled a country, that my friend had fled a country, and now her daughter was actively participating in marches. And so I didn't speak to my friend for a while. And the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what, Betsy, you're wrong. Your point of view is wrong. Write to your friend. And I did. I wrote her a very heartfelt email, and I think there needs to be more of that where you're holding a position, you're dug in, and then you realize, oh, I don't have all the information. All
Yeah.
right. And so
Yeah.
we had a great coming together again, which was really lovely.
And if more people did that, try to understand the other person's point of view. Plus, we live in a country, for the most part, where we can, or we have been told we can air our views without
Yes.
consequence. I mean, there's certain abuses to free speech that won't fly, but for the most part, we get to do that. We get to say it. We can disagree with somebody. I always think First Amendment rights are about protecting someone else's First Amendment rights.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And, in the case of this friend and her daughter, I really like her daughter. She's a wonderful person. But in that moment after October 7th, I couldn't take in what she was protesting about. And
Well,
it took me a while to get there. And there are still people who are very entrenched in both positions. There's no, for a lot of people, there is no gray whatsoever.
so one writer that I know wrote graphically about it because it happened at a kibbutz on which she had stayed for many years as a young person. So she
Hmm.
felt very personally involved. And also, she and her husband were in Israel, someplace else as these attacks were happening, and talking about the conditions for them. They really weren't in danger or terrible danger, but
Hmm.
just, supplies were cut off. They would go to the store and maybe there would be a tomato and a cucumber, but
And they were in bomb shelters, probably,
yes, they were.
right?
And she wrote about the atrocities quite vividly.
Hmm.
So, and when you focus on families and you focus on individuals, you see just how barbaric these things are. On the other hand, someone that I know who, if you say anything that is in support of Gaza, you're an anti-Semite. So,
Right. There's
and
that too. Hmm.
as a Gentile, it's like, okay, I want to be sensitive about what I say, but I also want to be moral.
I couldn't agree more. If we were having this conversation almost 3 years ago now, I don't know that I would have agreed with you, but I do agree with you. And it took a while, but I got there.
I just don't know how it has escalated to this point, and I know that that area of the world has always been a hotbed of, war and desecration, but anecdotally, I know of people who've done work on the Gaza Strip, and, these are neighbors.
Right. I mean,
Israel,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Palestinians.
Israelis crossed into Gaza all the time, I mean, before October 7th, for sure. I have a friend who, the woman I sold my business to, lived on that one of the kibbutzes that was attacked. And there's no talking to her about, there's no gray area in this.
Well, I mean, it's very hard
So,
for people. Like I understand. This is how vigilantes are made.
right. That's
Um,
right.
I don't want to
And it,
compare, but that is people want to take things into their own hands when they feel like things are so unfair
well,
to
that region is
people.
totally eye for an eye. It's always been eye for an eye. But yeah, I mean, going back to your point, it's permeated everything, really, every discussion. And look, people don't even have to have a particular topic. They'll just say, "I'm having a really hard time," and you'll say, "What's going on?" And they'll just say, "The world."
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
There's that too.
Yes. I think, we had a discussion about this maybe a week or so ago, but even entertainment, we have seen what's happened to, Stephen Colbert.
Hmm.
That show has been eliminated, and
And
whatever.
Kimmel, who got thrown off the air for a brief period.
I mean, he's moments away. If he makes one joke that they don't like, and it I really wonder about some of the changes that have occurred since we were younger and saw the world in a different way and had, I think, like safety regulations in place so this doesn't happen. You couldn't have a behemoth corporation owning media outlets and basically telling
Right.
everybody else what to do. So we're always beholden to these very big entities that have incredible power and hold so many other entities that might not even be related to media, but they're things that people need.
When you and I met, which was what, 1983, I think, something like that,
Yeah.
that is actually when deregulation started in media, maybe
Yeah.
a year before that. And I remember when you and I got into broadcasting, a very wise man said to me, what you're doing is you're serving the public. It's a public service to be on the radio and deliver information. I guarantee you that nobody ever says that anymore.
Not at all.
Not at all. I mean, news departments have been slashed, burned, cut. Look at CBS Radio, completely gone.
Well,
Right,
look at CBS 60 Minutes.
right, right, right. And
That's
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, no, Scott Pelley was interviewed, and I can't remember who he was at some conflict, and another correspondent saved his life. These groups are
Hmm.
family. They're out gathering information. They're doing this at huge personal risk, leaving
Right.
families. This isn't like nobody wants to give disinformation. I'm not going to put myself in peril to tell you a lie.
Yeah, there was an anchor, a TV anchor in the Quad Cities, right? So in the Midwest, Iowa, talking to his viewers on the air. It was his last day, I think last Friday. And he was basically in his farewell to his viewers, he was saying, I'm getting out of the news business.
Mhm.
And I hope that this station will provide balanced reporting. It was a kind of a beautiful exit. He wasn't knocking management, but he was speaking truth that who knows what news stations are going to look like, because if two corporations own them, right, there's not going to be really diversity of thought.
I go back to broadcast news, which is probably came out the year that we met or somewhere in there.
87, 87.
87. Okay, so it was a little later, but
Yep.
they were really predicting the end
Oh
of news
yeah.
as we know it. And I
Right.
just remember there's one character who says, the devil won't come with, fire and brimstone. He's going to come in a three-piece suit and he's going to talk really, nicely and tell
Hmm.
lies and he's going to get all the best girls, basically.
Right.
We're
That was
all going to buy
Albert
a bunch of,
Albert Brooks. That
yeah.
was
Oh
Albert
my
Brooks's
God.
monologue. But it's
So
true.
great.
It's true. It's funny about broadcast news. I reference that all the time.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Holly Hunter, pan in the butt producer. Everybody should have a producer like that.
Absolutely.
We're
I
looking
think, you
at
know
you,
what? I think everybody has a little Holly Hunter in them.
right? I hope they
Yeah.
do. I
Yeah.
hope they do.
I
And
think so.
so, so our news has become, it has become something that's fallen apart because the news that people do pay attention to, and no knock on YouTube because they're really great sources of information
Hmm.
there. But there's a lot of people who are quote unquote influencers. And do I want to get my information from them? And what are they influencing?
I mean, you don't, but people who are 30 years younger than you, that's where they go. That is what it is. And, I think all of these kind of alternative news sources, and I'm putting that in really loose quotes, news sources, it definitely affects community. Like it breaks down community, right? Because there's so much angst and arguments that happen online. I mean, if I can just make a really kind of a weird jump, but not terribly weird. I think, when you look at communities that feel fractured, I really feel like New York City was a model. And I'm not dismissing the violence that happened, after the Knicks won the championship, but you, you couldn't get a better example of community in the last month in this city. It's like everybody kind of put the news aside, right?
Hmm.
Everybody's a little nicer to each other. It feels different here.
Well,
So it is possible to feel community again.
so I wonder if sports will save the day because, of course, World Cup is going on right now, and
Right.
we feel it. People are coming to Boston, and it's
Yeah.
exciting. I've heard more people say it's exciting to have people from foreign countries come to our country and have a good time and talk about
Right.
like the Scots came in their kilts and the girls are going crazy over the Scots. The Scots are going to they're going to bars and they're drinking so much that like there is there's no pipeline anymore. It's like we got to
Yeah.
get more beer and bring it in. Like bring it on. And if you get
Yes.
a train or a bus, it is joyful. People are coming on, they're draped in flags, they're laughing,
Yeah.
they're telling jokes. You can hear different languages being spoken. And I wonder if this might be the beginning of something where people say, hey, this beats the other thing.
I feel like it could be a turning point because I think for such a long time, really the last decade, honestly, people have felt isolated between politics and COVID. And obviously, COVID turned incredibly political. Yeah, I think stuff like this is hugely helpful.
And I
And
want
in the case of our city, when you're standing at a crosswalk and you're wearing an orange watch band with blue and orange sneakers, and the person next to you has a cap on of the same colors, you'll talk with that person, and you may walk 4 blocks until you both part ways. We need
to say that I'm
more of
wearing
that.
purple.
We need more of that, though. I mean, that's what's going to, I think, save humanity, frankly.
We absolutely do. I live in a town of fewer than, I think, 15,000 people.
Hmm.
And in the last year and a half, some citizens have gotten together and they have produced a newspaper.
Love it. Love
Okay.
it. It's good news, right?
It's good. It is all local news. And it's about
Right.
the school department and
Hmm.
planning and development and, economics. And it touches a little bit, the peripheral
Yeah.
stuff. They're going to mention World Cup because people are affected by it, but transportation. And
Hmm.
it is not the highest levels of journalism, but it is definitely a start.
Well,
And
it's a community builder because you've got how many people working on that paper?
quite a few, quite a few. I'm going to say in all,
Right.
maybe 30 people at any different time are doing something.
Yeah, that's where it's at, right? People doing things that have positive influence and making us feel like we're part of something again. That's what's been so incredible here because for such a big city, if it has really felt like a small town in the last month or two.
I was in your little shire. Um,
Uh-huh. How'd you like us?
it was great because it was the same thing. It
Yeah.
was World Cup going on.
Hmm.
It was like I think the finals or the like right before the last game, and everybody was so pumped up. There were watch parties all over the city. Every train we got on had almost a party atmosphere, and there was just goodwill, and people were turning to each other and talking.
Yeah.
We actually got stranded. Amtrak stranded us in in
As only they can.
Old Saybrook. And
Uh-huh.
we ended up taking an Uber, and there were a couple of other people who were waiting. We're like, hey, come on, come in the car with us. So we all went.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that happened here quite a bit after 9/11, where you'd see somebody on a corner trying to hail a cab, and you'd kind of motion to that person from your cab and say, "Where are you going?" And if they said they're going uptown and you said, "Get in the cab."
That's right. It's so more
You
of that,
know?
like just
Yeah.
trusting people. Based on some of the things we've talked about, Betsy, do you feel that we're we're maybe some of this goodwill will translate into doing more things on a local level? Like, will there be a return to smaller media outlets? I know that's like a big ask, but I'm thinking maybe everything old is new again.
I think so. And I think it also speaks to like independent journalism. And I'm
Yeah.
talking about people who are credible news sources, right? Who have decided, hey, you know what? I'm not going to take my marching orders from a major corporation where you can tell me you can cover this, but you can't cover that. So I think you're seeing so many people go independent now. And I kind of like it. I mean, it's an expensive habit to subscribe to all these people, but I think it's worth it.
I agree with that. This is my caveat about it. I love independent journalism. One of the powers that traditional press has had is not only the ability to and the resources to report the news, but to defend what they report? And
Of
will these
course.
independent journalists have the resources to defend, like with lawyers? Will they be able to do that? And hopefully they will. And I keep thinking I'm married to an attorney, so like these things come up in conversation,
Liability,
right?
liability, right? Yeah.
Liability and conflicts, like who's supporting
Hmm.
independent, the so-called independent, but
Hmm.
maybe independent is not a very precise word to use anymore.
Yeah, maybe it isn't. I mean, like if you look at somebody like Jim Acosta who left CNN,
Right?
one of the most hated men in the White House press pool, not by his peers, but by the White House. I don't know how many subscribers he has, but he's still a trusted news source with trusted human sources. And
Right.
so, if people are spending $50 a year, he can make a really good living if he has a million or more subscribers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you look at somebody like Jim Acosta, who was with CNN, he went independent. And, he's like many other really skilled reporters, Terry Moran from ABC. They had enough of a following and credible sources in their own reporting that they can make a go of it.
Yeah.
So I'm really supportive of that. And at this point, I would rather listen to independent journalists than a corporation that has shredded their news division because
Mhm.
it's not a priority for them.
And what
And
about, oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, just to go from sort of the serious to the ridiculous, it bothers me to see what's happening in comedy as someone who, kind of came through the 80s, going to comedy clubs all the time,
Yeah.
80s and 90s, doing that and really enjoying things. And there are definitely some things that would be considered politically incorrect, but some of it is just, we're just laughing at ourselves. And, how can we have a society where we can really understand each other if we can't have a sense of comedy and there's no feeling of like, what's our shared sense of humor? What can we laugh about together? Because I think that laughter is one of the things that bring us together, music and laughter.
Right. And I have a friend in New York. She's a stand up comedian. I don't know if you know, do you know Judy Gold? Is that
Oh, I
familiar
know
to
the
you?
name. Yeah.
So I've known Judy for a long time. And, a really big concern of hers is that they're coming for the comics, right?
Because they are.
Because they are. And Judy's stance is like, hey, we're the people who make you think, right? You may not agree with what I'm saying, but I'm making you think.
Well, and so some of it started on college campuses, which are supposed to be, liberal arts. It's not like it's not an area of, oh, I can't get a job, so I will avoid liberal arts. Liberalism is being able to take in many different ideas, being curious about
Mhm.
what's going on in the world and saying, well, I didn't know about that, but I'm curious to know what it is, whether I
Well,
agree with it or not.
except that's your opinion and my opinion of what that definition is. But if you ask somebody who may have a different political opinion, they're going to say, it ruins the world, it affects our children, it's run amok, I want to censor it. Like it, right?
Well, so I feel like we've lost our sense of humor, or it's been eroded, and we've lost our sense of irony and satire and what it really is. I mean, do you think that Jonathan Swift could have written a modest proposal now? I mean, at the time, I think people were scandalized by that. It's like, we don't really mean cook your children and eat them. We mean like the system has to change because people can't
Right.
starve to death.
I was
But
just talking to somebody the other day. Like, do you think that the producers could have been made today?
I hope so, but maybe
I
not.
hope so too, but maybe not. Maybe people wouldn't have invested in it today.
I mean, we have talked, we do have a major crush on Mel Brooks.
Right.
And Mel Brooks, I saw him for the 40th anniversary viewing of Blazing Saddles
Ah.
with a couple of friends. I mean, we used to go to Mel Brooks movies and, of course, recite every line
Of
along.
course.
And he did a Q&A afterwards. He's the cutest little guy,
Oh, outstanding. Yeah,
right?
outstanding.
I mean,
Hmm.
just sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
Probably what, 90 at the time or something, or 92.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And he comes out and people ask, do you think you could have made Blazing Saddles today? And when did he come out? Like 1970 something?
Something, yeah.
Yeah, and he said, I'm not sure we could have made it in the 70s, but we did.
Right. But the climate is so different. I don't know that he could have made Blazing Saddles today. I'm not so sure about that.
I mean, he's
And again, it goes to your point. Like, it would be a damn shame if he couldn't. Like, Kimmel, for example, is like, yes, he's always on the hot seat. I thought he did something really interesting the other day. He's taking a 2-month sabbatical.
yes.
And he said, I'm going to have Rosie O'Donnell fill in for me. And I just thought, wow, you are great. Like,
He's a
he's not taking it lying down at all.
and why? So, I mean, it goes to a particular person can set you off, right?
Well, this right. I mean, this particular person, everybody's kind of afraid and tap dancing around the elephant in the room. So, I mean, I feel like from a societal standpoint, I think we will get back to community and laughter and shared experiences. I feel there's a piece of me that feels like the tide may be turning a little bit,
Hmm.
just a little bit. Like there are cracks now in the veneer.
Well, don't like to make allusions to Handmaid's Tale because, it's kind of been done to death. But there is a sequel to that book called The Testaments, and it's the
Mm,
viewpoints of three different women who are talking about it after this community breaks up. It falls apart. And one of the characters says, I always knew it would. I love dancing, and I knew that we couldn't have a society that banned dancing. And I'm thinking the same thing about humor. How can you have a society in which humor cannot exist?
right. And, that's the push pull right now. There's one segment of the population that wants to squelch all of that. But I think, you can't really keep people down in that way. I just don't think it works. And there are definitely cracks showing now. I feel better than have felt in a while.
I think a lot of people do, but there's so much work to be done and the residue of this time, and it feels
Oh, huge.
right. I mean, it feels
Yeah.
unfair to blame one person, although, a lot of it's happened under one person's watch. But what does this do to young people who have only experienced this? And I will say, what doesn't get tamped down is and I don't even know how to say this, but just the awfulness of reality TV or most reality TV shows. I just can't, unless it's a cooking or a pottery or
Right.
real estate show. I just don't like what's considered reality TV. It's really
Hey,
me.
look, it's the dumbing down of America colliding with what we've been experiencing for the last 11 years. And, the issue is not him because eventually he won't be there. The
Right.
issue is 77 million people who are neighbors. Like, we have to understand why they believe what they believe. And will their views be tempered once this period passes?
Right.
Because, like, there isn't anybody charismatic in that way to continue this.
Not that particular thing. And I want to add something. I don't just think it's 77 million people. I think it's a culture that has bred both this reality TV culture
Mhm.
of winning at any cost. And I don't think that that has a political party that it can hang its hat on. I think it is widespread. And this sort of like, and I've heard it on both sides. I'm not saying everybody, but I've heard like people wishing injury or death, and like, how is
Mhm.
how is that better than the other side if you are feeding that line? So I feel like we kind of, we created Frankenstein,
Yeah, we
or,
did.
or
And
we
I
created
think,
the conditions for it.
yeah, and I think, one of the conditions for it was COVID because you had people isolated, you had people going to alternative sources for information about their health. That was like, that went from like a little snowball to a massive snowball in a nanosecond. And so, there are still people who are very angry about that. Therefore, it translates to other areas in life.
Things get politicized, like just ordinary things. But when is it not politics anymore and just bad information or reinterpreted information or immorality?
Here's one it crosses over, in my opinion. If you look at COVID, okay, if you didn't want to take the vaccine, fine, don't take it, right? But don't be a screaming maniac at doctors and nurses who are trying to save lives. Like, at a certain point, your belief crosses over and hurts other people.
Right. A lot of doctors and nurses have left.
Yes.
Try to get a
Yeah.
try to get a PCP.
Yeah. I mean, one of my neighbors in my building was running the COVID unit at Mount Sinai during peak COVID in New York City. And, she saw some incredible things happening. But what she also saw was a lot of anger that was, starting to build. In New York City, frankly, we saw less of it than other parts of the country. But, it still existed.
No, it does still exist, and it's if you can plant a little bit of doubt, there are more parents who are not having their kids vaccinated for certain things. And I'm thinking, I don't know, when someone said, well, I don't think you should have to be vaccinated. I'm like, well, if you want to send your kid to public school, if you want them
Hey,
to be enrolled in certain activities, they need to be vaccinated. I think the
well,
secretary.
that's in your state and my state, but it's not the case in Florida,
All right,
right?
so in Utah.
Or in the US military. Like, they don't have to get flu vaccinations now.
Yeah, and flu incidence has spiked dramatically.
Right. Same with measles, right? I mean,
The
so,
state of Utah, it is not a safe state for measles anymore.
right, right.
I don't know.
So,
I kind of like not seeing people in iron lungs. That's
yeah,
just
it's not a great look.
no. So
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, part of me feels optimistic because I see community coming together in really lovely ways. And then, of course, there's 10 other things on some days where I think, okay, am I really that optimistic? But I think by and large, I feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I think there's still hope for us, but man, it's going to take years to rebuild.
You've been listening to Broadly Speaking,